Probably could. Hi, everyone. Sorry, Madison and I are talking, but welcome to the Lunchtime live stream for PopCrime TV. Most of you know because you saw me promoting this. I've been so excited to have Madison McGhee, the host of Ice Cold Case, on today. Madison, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yes, of course, of course. So I was just saying to her, not everybody is StreamYard equipped. It's really wonky sometimes. That's why she's a bit grainy or a bit blurry, but we have her here, and that's all that matters. Hi, Taryn. Thank you so much. I also love having you here for the Lunchtime Lives. Now, Madison, we spoke. I don't even know how long it was, maybe 6 months ago. I had interviewed you
Yes.
about your podcast. Yeah, Ice Cold Case. And for people that are not familiar with Madison, she's one of the most incredible people. She decided pretty much out of nowhere that she was going to investigate her dad's 2002 murder. So, Madison, if you don't mind, could you just take people through hi Sue, sorry, I'm just going to pop up some of my members. Thanks for joining. Could you take everyone through just your thought process from when you found out that your dad didn't actually have a heart attack like you originally thought when you were 16 and you found out he was murdered, and what went through your head and how you decided to do this?
Yeah. So when I was 6, my dad was murdered, and then my family never told me. So when I was 16, I found out the truth. And it was this like very weird sort of experience of like having this gut feeling. Something felt really off, asking my mom, finding out that my dad was actually murdered. And that my life really took a pivot at that point. But my life didn't really pivot a lot until later when I really started to dive into this. So the realization was a bit strange. But
Yeah.
then when I started to really go into like the details of the case and what was going on and all of these things, it was like, oh my gosh, like this was not at all what I was expecting. And I learned a lot about my dad, the area that he lived in, my family members, the case. And that's when I really got into this and started my podcast to sort of get the information out into the world and see if it would lead to sort of it getting solved. So that's where we're at right now.
Yeah. I mean, no, and it's crazy. So this is Belmont County, Ohio, is where
Oh, and I have a light. Sorry.
oh,
I
you
might
have a
die,
light.
but
Yay. No, that's
maybe
great.
that
That's great.
helps. I don't know. I found one.
Yeah, no, it did a little. You're still grainy, but it's okay. Like I said, it's StreamYard. It's not for everyone. Trust me, when I first started doing this, I was getting kicked off nonstop. Everybody wanted to kill me. It was horrible. But
Oh my god.
oh my gosh.
Oh,
And
well,
why do
next time I'll be better. So have me back.
no, I definitely will. And I also just want to call myself out. Like we're talking about a murder and I'm like, they wanted to kill me. I don't know why I speak like
Oh
that.
my
It's
gosh,
like,
no.
yeah, but it's like strange. I don't know. But yeah, so Belmont County, Ohio, where this took place. Can you tell us about this area and what we should know about the location?
Yeah, so locationally it's really interesting. So people probably have no idea. I mean, if I wasn't from there, I wouldn't even know that West Virginia was a state, right? Like it's small and nobody knows that it exists. So Belmont County, Ohio is just right across the bridge from Wheeling, West Virginia. So it's like basically
Okay.
West Virginia. Sort of this interesting kind of tri-state area. You're 45 minutes from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but you're also like 5 minutes from West Virginia and you're in Ohio. So you're kind of in this unique area. It's
Yeah.
small. It was super industrial. There were like a lot of factories there back in the day. So where West Virginia is a little bit more coal miney, this is more of like
Mhm.
an industrial town.
Okay.
But tons of drugs are funneling through here. I mean, there's obviously, back in the 80s and 90s, there was a lot of the like, let's funnel drugs to the Black community and arrest them. So that was
Yeah.
happening and it really impacted this town. But now that's how they're making all their money. So you have drug dealers almost everywhere in this town. You
Yeah.
have federal informants living here, state informants living here. I mean, it's a really interesting place and it's like everyone's looking out for themselves, but they're also trying to rat out each other. It's a really weird town.
Yeah, and let's just for people that don't know, your dad was black and your mom is white. Is that
Yes.
okay? All right.
Yeah.
So, and your dad, the murder happened in 2002 in this town in Ohio, in the doorway of his home. Oh, you looked
Yes. My
so
dad
clear for a
was
second. Your
home.
face looked so clear. Sorry, I was very excited. Not about, yeah, not about this, but so that's where it took place. And you later, I think it was his own nephew that was the main informant. Do I have that right?
Yeah, so my dad became an informant
Okay.
because he turned in his nephew. It was this
Okay.
really weird situation. My dad owned a bar on the Wheeling side, in West Virginia, and my cousin, my dad's nephew, was selling drugs out of that bar. And so my dad was implicated because he owned the bar. And they basically were like, we can cut you a deal. If you rat him out, then you are free to go. And so he, turned on him. I mean, there were 78 people on this indictment. Like the whole town was basically like, yeah, this guy's selling drugs. But my dad
Right.
was one of them. And that's sort of when he became a snitch. And he sort of got into the CI program and started, informing from that point on. And it's identified in the police files that he was a confidential informant. So, yeah, I mean, he was like working for the Belmont County Sheriff's Department.
So, I mean, that must be just horrible when you're investigating a case because how do you even narrow down? You're like, "Oh, well, a ton of people probably wanted him dead. So where do you even start?" That's insane.
Yeah. It's really wild because, yeah, I mean, that alone, you have so
Yeah.
many possibilities. There's also my dad was in the middle of a custody hearing, and so that is, like, this really weird situation,
Yeah.
and so you're like, "Okay," I mean, that's normally where you go first, right? Like, I'm friends with Josh Mankiewicz from Dateline, and he's always like, "I'm going back to that. I think it's that custody thing," and so because that's just, like, where
Oh.
everyone's mind goes. And
Yeah.
so there's
Yeah.
that, but then it's also like, but he was turning in all these people, so it could have been that. And then there's also,
Right.
the possibility that it was random. So you have all of these situations going on where you're like, they could have in a town like this, they could have been trying
Mhm.
to rob a drug dealer, hit the wrong house, got
Yeah.
spooked, and it was random. Or it could have been this custody hearing, or it could have been an informant. And you're like left with like just 100 possibilities.
So can you elaborate on the custody hearing just a little bit? Because I don't think I've gotten that far.
Yeah.
Or yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't
curious.
talk about it a ton.
Okay.
It is like a full episode, but then we kind of like leave it. So I have a younger brother. Um, I was going to be probably the last child, and then my dad had another,
Got it.
sort of, not on
Yes.
purpose. And
Yeah.
he was like 8 months old when my dad was killed. So
Okay.
my dad knocked up a sex worker, and that's how Shane was born. And there
Oh.
was like this very weird situation going on where there was sort of an illegal adoption happening. There's this, or was this house in Philadelphia where women would go, and on one side they would work, and on the other side there was sort of this illegal adoption ring where families in Philadelphia who couldn't have children would adopt babies that were accidentally conceived through this operation.
Oh.
And the word on the street is that actually a Philadelphia police officer and his school teacher wife had purchased my brother Shane, and that was going to be their son, and they were like at the hospital when he was born. There's two versions of the story going around. One is that Shane actually went home with this couple, and the other is that at the hospital Deneen, his biological mom, was like, no, you can't have him. Either way, she took him back. Whether he did go home with them for a few days or didn't, she took him back to
Wow.
Ohio and was like, you're not taking my son. Had already collected the check, kept the money. And so it was like this really crazy story. So my dad was like always
Movie.
supportive of like, well, whatever Deneen wants to do. Like if this family is going to give Shane a better life, let
Yeah.
them have him, whatever. I think in the beginning my dad was a little bit like, I want to keep my kid, but was sort of like, whatever, it's up to her. So when Deneen brought him back, that's when my dad was like, well, I want custody. Like, you're not fit or equipped to be his mom. And
Right.
Shane was born with like a severe heroin addiction because Deneen was using when
Oh,
she was pregnant. So
that's
there was
so
just a lot
sad.
of like, yeah,
Yeah.
going on. So my dad was in like the middle of this custody hearing. I'm pretty sure. So he was murdered July 11, 2002 was a Thursday. He
Mhm.
was supposed to go to court on Friday for their final hearing. And he obviously never made it because he died. So there was a
Whoa.
lot of speculation that, Deneen had a lot to lose. She was getting social security checks, disability checks for Shane. I mean, there's a lot happening there, right? And if my
Yeah.
dad got custody, he would lose a lot of those benefits. So I think that there was some, whether or not she was involved at all, I'm not sure. I've looked really heavy into it. I can't find any sort of hard evidence that she had anything to do with it. She has since passed away.
Oh, damn. Okay.
I Either way, she definitely benefited from my dad being out of the picture, whether or not she had anything to do with it. Um,
Wow.
but yes, it's very crazy.
I
And
get it now why Josh is like that. That makes so much sense. I mean, and
yeah,
she probably was connected to how, like, I mean,
several
honestly, and
drug
who else
dealers in
has been?
town. Yeah,
Yes.
a lot of people who like, and there's a possibility in my mind where I'm like, oh, multiple theories can sort of overlap here, right? Where Deneen's connected to all of these guys who have gone to jail because of my dad. So it's like there's a lot of connection here, where my dad being an informant could also be true. And there's so many things. But, I'm hearing now from a lot of people,
Yeah.
tips, sources, etc., that this was technically a rant. My dad was not a target, but he was killed
Okay.
by people he knew. And so it's this weird, now I'm going down this other path where maybe it wasn't, maybe this was an accident. He was never meant to be killed. They weren't even meant to go to his house, but they ended up there. They shot him, and it's people he knew. And so I'm going through all the things.
Oh my God. I mean, I wonder, and it's like, of course you want justice. That's part of the reason why you're doing this. But I wonder, is there a way to have someone step forward and promise them, God, something? Like, not necessarily immunity, clearly, but like, hey, if you come forward, you won't. I don't know if that's even a thing, right? Like, we won't,
Totally. I mean,
life in prison will
unfortunately,
be up. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, this happens all the time, right? Where it's and this is sort of the corruption in the system that currently exists, right? It's not up to me.
Yeah.
I could not there were 4 people there, I think, that day.
Mhm.
I could go to one of them and knock on their door and be like, "If you didn't pull the trigger," only one person did, right? "If you didn't
Yeah,
pull the trigger, we could cut you some sort of deal if you say
exactly.
who was there and what happened and all of that stuff." But that's not up to me. That's up
Yeah,
to 5 dudes sitting in an office right now in Belmont County, Ohio, who really have no
right.
connection to this case, don't really care either way. And if they don't solve this one, they'll just move on to the next one. And so
Yeah,
it's like this weird, I could ask them to do something, but then, there's protocols and paperwork and all this stuff. And maybe they say something to this guy, he rats someone out, and then they don't
yeah,
follow through with what they, deal they made him. It's so crazy. Um,
yeah,
and it's also annoying that that's what I have to resort to because of those same people, right? They didn't collect enough evidence at the scene. So physical evidence will never solve this case. Now
yes,
it's
right.
witness testimony that I'm relying on. And now this whole sort of cycle of I need the witness testimony to line up with whatever deal they're going to give them because they didn't collect enough evidence. It's just all messed up. It's all messed up.
No, so I actually froze. I would like I wanna just I'm gonna reboot this really quick, but,
Oh, yes.
people will just wanna know who joined late. While I reboot this, Madison, if you could just tell everyone again the year and how old you were, when your dad passed away, and
Yes.
then how old you went and then just the story of how you were told when he was killed when you were 16. If you don't mind, I will be right back.
Yeah, totally. So my dad was murdered on July 11th, 2002. So We're just 11 days past the 22nd anniversary. I was 6. So I was not told, obviously, that my dad was murdered because my family didn't want me to, have to deal with that. Um, when I was 16, however, my family still hadn't told me. We were visiting my family, and I was looking at my cousin Omar. We were saying goodbye, we were leaving, and I had like a visceral reaction. I mean, it felt like someone had punched me in the stomach, and I hurled forward and the breath was knocked out of my lungs. And um it was so bizarre, and it was almost like I was watching a movie, and I saw Omar with my dad while my dad was having a heart attack. So I get in the car, my mom's like, "Are you okay?" Like, I was like, "I can't breathe." And I asked her, I was like, "Was Omar there with my dad when he had a heart attack and he didn't help him?" And my mom was like so upset. She was like, "Oh my gosh, what are you talking about?" And that's when she was like, "I have to tell you something. Your dad actually didn't have a heart attack. He was murdered." And a lot of people, think Omar was there and maybe didn't do as much to help him. And so it was very strange that I sort of knew what happened without knowing the context. And so yeah, it was like just this really um crazy event and story. And I'm not sure, like, hello,
Hi, I'm
how
back.
I
Sorry.
knew or what happened, but it's perfect timing because I just finished.
Oh, great. Okay, good. And I'm
I was
pinning a
like, what am I gonna say?
no, seriously. Taryn said wow, because I've heard this story, but it is wow. Multiple things can be at play. Baby farming using the most vulnerable for their goal. That I've never heard the term baby farming. My goodness, but
Yeah.
that makes sense. And so you'd actually, just really quick, you did an awesome talk at CrimeCon with Josh Mankiewicz. I watched that after the video. You guys have a great rapport, and he is super funny while you're talking about something very serious, which I really appreciate.
Same,
You
same.
know?
Yeah, I love him. We're getting coffee this weekend. I'm so excited.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's so
he's the
fun.
best. Yeah, he's the
Yeah.
best.
And there hasn't been a Dateline about your dad, right?
No, Dateline's
Okay.
really moved to covering solved cases
Yeah.
exclusively.
Yeah.
Obviously there's like a chance that they would do it, but we've kind of gone back and forth. And Josh is very much on the boat of like, as soon as it gets solved, like Dateline has the exclusive, like it'll only be on Dateline. So
But like,
um
Madison, I feel like that is not I feel like the purpose of doing these is so people watch it and they come forward and they're like, "Hey, I know something."
yeah,
I feel like they should,
I
I don't know. That's how you get cases solved, right? Like you
yeah,
put them out there and
no, I
but
totally agree. Totally
yeah.
agree. Yeah, it's a bummer. It's almost like, so I dealt with this sort of uphill battle when I was making my show. I wanted help from production companies. I was like, "Please, anyone, like, I can't afford to do this. I don't know how to do this." So I pitched the story to, like, probably, like, 45 companies, and every single one of them was like, "Oh, unless your dad's name is, like, John Benet Ramsey, like, we're not really interested." And so there was this element of, like, my story, my dad's case wasn't popular enough. It didn't have sort of the commercial factors. I mean, even the reviews on my show sometimes are like, "Yeah, no crap, your dad got murdered. He was a drug dealer." And so it's like, I think there's this level of like, "Oh, well, obviously this would happen to you. Like, why would anyone care?" And I did my show because I was like, well, that's how you make it, a case that people are talking about. And if I'm telling the story about my dad, it's no longer like a reporter just talking about a drug dealer. It's a daughter talking about her dad, which is how we should see every case, right? Like, no matter what someone
Yes.
did or whatever, they're a parent, a cousin, a sister, a son, whatever. And so
Yes.
I think that is like, now that the case is becoming a little bit more popular,
Mhm.
now I'm having those conversations of like, but wait, it's big enough, I swear, with the Datelines of the world, and not just the production companies to make the
Right.
podcast. Now it's like the documentaries and all these things. They're like, well, it's unsolved and it's not that popular. And that's where I'm like, but I'm asking you to do this because maybe you'll help me solve the case. Like maybe
Exactly.
that
Yes.
will drum up enough information or interest that it gets it solved. And so it's this
Yeah.
sort of weird circle, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's how I feel. And I want to just point out something just because I feel like everybody in the chat right now wasn't familiar with the podcast or your story. And something really amazing. And I think this was right around the time that we spoke. You had Daryl Smith, he reached out to you. And people that don't know that name, this was the guy that you thought did it. And it wasn't just you. Obviously, you had evidence to support that and whatnot. But you were like, oh, he's contacting me to sue my ass. And then he actually was like, I just want to set the record straight. So can you just tell us about that?
Yeah, and there's been updates since then, which is so crazy. Yes. So the first, if you haven't listened, I won't do too many spoilers, but
Okay.
the first 9 episodes, I'm like part 1, installment 1, whatever you want to call it. 9 episodes. I really just take you through, like, I've been investigating this for 4 years, like going through the case files, trying to figure out who my dad knew, possible
Mhm.
suspects, possible theories, etc. And I'm just laying it all out for you so that maybe this podcast does well and it becomes sort of one of those bigger cases and everyone's talking about it and then more
Yeah.
information comes out, right? So by the end of episode 9, or I guess the end of episode 8, everyone's like, well, what do you think happened to your dad? You've been looking into this for so long. What do you think? And so episode 9 is pretty much like, well, here's what I think happened. And, I think that Daryl Smith was there at the very least, possibly pulled the trigger. He was the police's number 1 suspect. They dropped the charges suspiciously, not really sure what happened there, et cetera, et cetera. And I just go through kind of like what I think happened.
Yeah.
And then it ends, and I take 6 months off to sort of investigate again. And then I was going to do installment 2, which I'm in the middle of right now.
Yeah.
And while that I was in that break and that investigative time, I had found Daryl Smith. He was currently in prison for like a 7-year drug sentence. And my goal was to reach out to him, get added to his visitor list, and talk to him from behind glass and like literally just be like, did you kill my dad?
Yeah. Yeah.
And before I could do that, I got a message one morning. It was December 13th. Happy birthday, Taylor Swift. I got a message on Facebook at like 6 in the morning, and it was from a name that was like super similar to Daryl's name. It was his middle name and like a
Mhm.
last name identifier, but it wasn't his real name. And so I was like, well, that's weird because like it almost feels like people do that on Facebook to like kind of cover their identity. They don't want people to find them. And I was like, that's weird. That could be Daryl. I opened the message and it's like a novel. And I'm like, oh my God.
Wow.
But then I'm like, is someone messing with me? Like, he's in prison. Like, I don't think that's him. And I looked it up and he had been released. And I was like, oh my God, it's Daryl Smith. He's reaching out to me. And so I read the whole thing and I responded and we went back and forth for a while. And finally I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get on a plane and I'm going to come talk to you. So we met up in a library and we talked for 2 hours and some change. And yeah, he was like, wasn't me. And I left that conversation. I think that's when we talked. I left that
Yeah.
conversation like, oh, maybe it wasn't him. And I think that's because
So you
I'm feeling
believed him.
I believed him a little bit. I'm always skeptical of
Of
everything, but I
course.
was like,
Yeah.
I went from being like, he was definitely there, no one's gonna change my mind, to like, maybe I was wrong. I don't know. And so I
Yeah.
think that's where I am dealing with a lot of narcissists, sociopath personality types,
Mhm.
people who really are like looking out for themselves. And
Yeah.
I am an empath. So when I'm hearing these stories or I'm talking to these people and they're like, I didn't do it, I'm like, well, maybe they didn't. And maybe I have empathy for that. And maybe,
Yeah.
I'm like putting myself in your shoes and all these things where they're not doing that for me, obviously. Now,
Right.
fast forward, it's been a little over 7 months since we talked. I feel differently than I did when I met him.
Oh.
And, that will get unpacked in part 3. So stay tuned. Part 2 is not even finished yet, but I'm already working on part 3.
Yeah.
But it will get unpacked in part 3 pretty extensively. I've been, in contact with a ton of people who have a lot more information than even I knew. And, I'm now going from like hearing from sources who are like anonymously reaching out to me to talking to a lot of people behind glass. And those people know a lot. And I'm learning a lot, and it's been very eye-opening.
Okay, so there's like a couple things. Well, first of all, I just want to point this out. Taryn says she just subscribed to your podcast and she can't wait to listen. It's really good. And I still have to catch up because I'm still like, I started it and then I have really bad ADD. So
you have a lot going on.
No, but I really do. Like when I get my nails done, I like to listen to like you know what I mean? Like they take 2 hours to do. So I want to sit there and listen to something. But do you find, well, first of all, some of the people in the chat know, they're very familiar with one of our favorites, Jack Fox of Never a Truer Word. He's basically a human lie detector. He's amazing at statement analysis. So if you wanted to send like the initial Facebook message or something, he could sort of dissect that into truths.
I love that.
Yeah, and possible fallacies. But the thing with like statement analysis and all this stuff, and Peter Hyatt is really good at this too. He's actually helped solve cases based on testimony of witnesses or based on statements of what they say happened when, it's maybe part of it's true. And he can make an assessment on certain things, but I find that to be super helpful in every single investigation. And some people don't believe in it, which is interesting. And because they'll say, oh, it's opinion based. Yes, but it's expert opinion based. So I think it's worth having it analyzed. Then my other thing was, how do you know you can trust some of these people behind the glass? Because won't they say anything just to get out or to cut themselves a deal?
So one person I'm talking to specifically, how do I say this? In a weird, they were locked up when my dad was murdered. So as far as direct involvement, they have none. I did suspect some sort of indirect involvement. So there is an element of like, are they trying to protect themselves from that? But at the end of the day, like, I can't even get enough evidence of who shot my dad. There's definitely not, I'm not going to like lock up someone for conspiracy, right? Like that's not happening. I don't think they're trying to sort of protect themselves from that. And they are like, for someone who was not there, like my key suspect, witness, like whatever, they are like the person I know that I need to talk to and have been trying to get a hold of for years. They come out of every single person's mouth that I talk to. Everyone in this town is afraid of them. They know everything. Daryl brought this person up. I mean, everybody knows this person.
Oh God. Okay.
And I got a hold of them. It was like, just tell me. They're locked up, obviously, for something else that has nothing to do with this. And it was like, just tell me what you know. And it was very interesting. There was a lot of, I mean, obviously, you can't fully trust, I can't fully trust anyone. No. But basically I'm not a journalist. I'm not an investigator. Have never been a detective. My process in the beginning was always collect as many stories as possible, write them all down, and whatever overlaps between every single story has to be the truth, because this person's not talking to this person and this person hates this person. And if they're all saying the same one thing, that piece of it has got to be true. And then from there, I start assembling, Madison's version of what happened based on what overlaps from every story. And this person was telling me things that, I mean, were like overlapping from things I've been hearing, and they've been locked up and haven't been talking to anyone, and they don't trust anybody. And it was like, okay, so let me pull this out, and let me pull this out, and let me pull this out. And from there, I was like, okay, I think I'm really onto something. And what's really crazy is what I think now is so similar, not exact, very
Yeah.
similar to my original theory. There's bits and pieces where it's like, okay, I got more clarity on this, and
Yeah.
this part of it's not true, or oh, this part of it is. But I am like, wow, I'm hearing from a lot of people also who don't know each other that,
Yeah.
oh, you were really onto something. When you had that theory in episode 9, like you were really onto something. And I had convinced myself because of my empathy, reviews on the show, et cetera, et cetera.
Uh,
What if
yeah.
I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? I shouldn't be
Yeah.
accusing someone of this. What if I didn't get it right? And so I tried to kind of backtrack and really look at it from a bird's eye view. And now everyone is like, oh, but actually, the people who were really around at the time are like, well, you were kind of onto something. And if you run with that theory, you'll probably
Yeah.
find stuff. And so that's sort of why I think that this one person I'm specifically talking about is pretty believable, just because at this point he has nothing to lose, especially regarding this. Like he'll never be implicated in this murder, even if he had
Yeah.
something to do with it. And so he knows, and on top of that, he's family. So, yeah,
Ooh. Wait,
yeah.
so it's not Omar, is it? Or are you allowed to
No.
it's okay. All right. Okay, that's really interesting. Okay. All right. So I mean, that is honestly like you are an investigative journalist at this point. I don't know why you wouldn't call yourself that. You're doing way more investigating than most investigative journalists that refer to themselves as that do on a regular basis that I've seen, honestly. So I don't know. Hold on. I don't know who this is. Chris Duet. How do I say that? Am I crazy for not knowing who that
I'm gonna
is?
write that down.
Yeah, I'll look him up after unless someone wants to explain to me. I'm really embarrassed that I don't know who that is. I'm sorry, but I wanted to put it up there just in case. Um,
Oh,
so
perfect.
do you ever like not you live in LA year round, but do you when you travel to these places, do you get nervous? I mean, you're talking to some seedy people that do some things that might, not be so great. Are you ever like sleeping with one eye open?
Yeah, so, yes, it's been really crazy,
Yeah,
not to get into, like, the long of it, but, I've expended, like, over 100% of my financial resources on this show, and
yeah,
so when it came to interviewing Daryl specifically, every time I've gone back, well, not every time, most of the times I've gone back to this town, I've gone with
yeah,
people. I've been able to afford to, like, fly someone out with me, bring an audio person, etcetera. This time I was looking at my bank account and it was like, I can't even really afford to fly myself. So I
yeah,
definitely can't bring anyone else. And so I was very scared. I my grandmother let me borrow a little bit of money to get a hotel out there, because it is
yeah,
2.5 hours from my hometown. So in theory, I could drive there, do my interviews, drive home, and stay at my actual house. But
yeah,
I needed to be there for like a couple days and like really utilize my days. So I got a hotel, sort of on like the other side of town in like a smaller area where like nobody would like think it's like that I would be staying kind of.
okay,
Because there's sort of like a main area where there's like a ton of hotels and like that's where you would stay. So I stayed like 30 minutes outside of town. And so I try to do that. I don't let people know when I'm coming. The only person who knew
yeah,
was Daryl.
right,
I try to like, I'll lie and say like, "Oh, I'm in town for like 5 days," when I'm really in town for like 8 or 9, or I'll say like, "Oh, I'm in
yeah,
town all week," when I'm only there for 1 day, just to throw people off a little bit about like what I'm doing, and then no one knows like in which direction did she lie? Is she here longer? Is she here shorter?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and so, yeah, I try to kind of keep to myself. My location services on my phone are actually turned off. And when I'm traveling for this specifically, I turn them back on and I share my location with like 45 people in like totally different places. Like someone in
yeah,
Australia has my location, Texas, Canada, my hometown, like a bunch of people know where I am. I'll text like I'm going to interview Daryl Smith. If you don't hear from me in like 3.5, 4 hours, because I don't know how long it's going to take, like,
Yeah.
call, I'm here, call the police. So I try to do stuff like that just because I don't know. And
Yeah.
so stuff like that. But other than that, like, that's all.
Yeah. No, I think that's so brave because I really do. I think it's so scary because you are out there loud about what you're doing, and you're loud about the fact that you're not really going to stop until you figure out what happened. And now you have Tenderfoot TV behind you, which is huge. They are honestly like arguably like the number one podcast platform out there for, you know, missing people, cold cases and whatnot. So that's also like really incredible. Do you feel a sense of safety knowing that they're behind you also?
Um,
Yes and no, I'm sure. I mean, I know that it's everyone's dispersed. They're not like you're not in one office together
no,
per se.
totally.
Yeah.
That's funny. I'm like imagining like Payne and Donald like cracking their knuckles or something.
Yeah, no, I guess I didn't mean like your bodyguards or anything, but you're right.
No, no, but yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like the more that people and that, yes, I mean, I think the more people are talking about this, the safer I
Yeah,
feel, honestly, just because now I'm at a point where I'm like, if anything happens to me, it's going to be like national news, right? Like daughter investigating dad's murder
yes,
gets,
yes,
death threat or gets hurt or something. Like they're definitely not going to try anything. And so, yeah, I mean, with Tenderfoot, pushing the show more, the bigger it gets, the safer I
mhm,
feel, in the sense that like they would be crazy to try anything now. Even if
yeah,
like I end up dead, it's like you're going to get caught. Like there's no way you're not. So I
right,
feel a
right,
little bit of safety in that. But
yeah,
I mean, yeah, I do. I tend to like not talk a big talk, but I do tend to always be like, "Oh, I'm fine. I don't feel I'm good. I'm not scared, whatever." And like there are
yeah,
moments where I'm like I installed like I hope my landlord's not watching this. I installed like an extra lock on my door in my apartment, and like I have a house in the desert, and I like installed security cameras, and like I try to do stuff like that where I'm like I just want to be like 100% sure. And sometimes like I mean my house is in like the middle of nowhere in the desert. Sometimes the internet goes out and I'll be checking my security cameras. Like if they go out, I'm like freaking out. Like, oh my God, someone's at my house. And it's like, oh no, there was just like an internet outage or something. It's like something small.
yeah.
But I'm like, oh my God, like someone's there. They've like cut the cords or something. Um,
Oh,
so
Madison, that
I'm
is
a
like,
little
sorry,
on
that is
edge.
like, no, that's honestly, you have that in your head, and I totally get it, which is it's funny because I know that New York City gets a horrible reputation, and there is obviously a lot wrong right now, but I do feel a lot safer in a building with lots of people and an apartment than
Yeah.
I would obviously like, you know, at my parents' house, for example, in New Hampshire. They're like up on a hill and the service is awful. And I'm just like, yeah, it's tough. It's
Yeah.
I can't imagine. And like I walk around with like a can of mace, a knife. My kids have air tags in their shoes. Like I don't want to say that I'm paranoid, but I want to say that I'm like prepared, if that makes sense.
Totally.
There's a
Yeah.
difference. Like, right? Like you can
And
be
I'm like,
prepared.
I don't know
Yeah.
if this is, like, okay to say. I'm like, I feel weird about guns, I'll just say it. I have, like, weird
It's
feelings about guns.
okay. Yeah.
And so a lot of people when this started happening were like, "Oh my God, you should get a gun." And I'm like, I just don't know how I, like, personally feel about that. I mean, I'm from West Virginia,
Yeah.
like, everybody's got one, right? I think my mom had one
Mhm.
the whole time I was growing up, I just didn't know.
Yeah.
My dad died at the hands of a gun, so I just feel kind of weird about it. But,
Yeah.
there are these, like, my friend sent me this thing, it's like they're not guns, but they shoot out, like, pepper spray bullets or something.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they're
I think
it's
I've heard of
really
those.
interesting. So, like,
Yeah.
some people have been like, "Oh, you should, like, try something like that." And so I, am looking into certain things. I have considered taking, like, a gun safety class.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, just stuff like that where I'm like, I just wanna be as prepared as possible. I do get death threats, so I'm not doing this just out of, like, pure
Oh,
paranoia.
Madison,
There are
are you
people that
serious?
yeah, and so, there's, like, weird
Oh,
stuff like that.
scary.
But again, I mean, I'm like, I know the people sending them. They're people, they're like family members.
Oh,
And I'm
that's
like, you can't afford to fly to
horrible.
California and kill me. So I'm not worried about it. Like, there's no way that you're like
Right.
flying out here to like kill me. Like it's fine. You're just a little keyboard warrior. But
Yes.
yeah, it
Yeah.
is interesting. Like now when I go back home to West Virginia, like I'll capture everything like on my phone and then I'll post it when I'm back
Yeah.
in LA. And like so people have no idea like I'm back home or whatever.
Yes.
And so yeah,
I do
it's
that
been kind of
too.
interesting.
No, I
Yeah.
do that too. I totally do the later post after I leave somewhere. I'm like, oh, now I'll post. Just not that like
Yeah.
anyone gives a shit about me, but like I just feel like I don't know.
Yeah.
There's this is like not the I don't know. I had a few issues and it was just basically I am a nice person and I feel like even guilty saying this, but like I took my kids for ice cream and there was this kid. I say kid because he looked like a kid, but he definitely had some issues, I want to say. It turns out he had a bunch of issues. One of them was he was severely autistic, but my husband, I had taken a picture of him because he said, "Oh, can I eat ice cream with you and your kids? I'm lonely." And I said, "Oh, sure." So he came over to our table. He's eating with us. He's telling me about like how he's bullied at school. He's like a senior or whatever. And I felt horrible. I felt so bad. So when he asked for my
Right.
number, I gave it to him. And he kind of got my name. He started following me on social media and he started hitting me up a lot. And my husband was like, he looks like a 30-year-old, like posing as it. I don't think that was the case, but he said he looked like it was. One day I tagged where we were for brunch, my family, like me, my husband, my two kids, and he showed up and that was it.
Ugh,
I was like, yeah. And my husband was so mad at me. And I guess it's just you don't think about that stuff, right? Like
you
I
don't.
just don't
Yeah.
think about, yeah, like a location or whatever, because it's like, hey, I'm not doing anything. I'm nobody. Why would you want? And he was weird. He was creepy. And then the other after that, there was one more instance where he showed up at near my house because he knew where we live. Because sorry, it got to the point where he got himself invited somehow because I'm a pushover to my daughter's birthday that was at our apartment. It was bad. I'm horrible. Okay, Madison, I'm horrible.
Oh,
Like I need yeah, I just feel like I it's hard to ignore people when they seem so sad and like
no,
they need help. So,
totally.
yeah, so he
Totally.
showed up right near my apartment and my kids are with me and I remember there was like a dry cleaners and I know the guy at the dry cleaners so I like shoved my kids and I'm like just wait in there for 1 second. And then I was like and still feel guilty about this to this day because autistic people they don't have the social skills that we have. And so I sat there
Right.
on the street corner and I was like, "Don't you ever come near." It was so bad. And I like I said, I feel so
Oh.
guilty, but I haven't heard from him. Sorry,
Yeah,
I don't know
no,
how
I
I
mean,
got off.
you have to like, yeah, it's crazy. I put myself in weird positions too sometimes because like
Yeah.
and women, right? They can be too nice or whatever. And like then it's weird. And then all of a sudden now you're mean. And it's funny that you even feel bad because that's like
Yeah.
what you're trained to be like, oh, now you're the mean one. And it's like, no, 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 you're protecting your family. Like you're allowed to like stand up for yourself. So it is, don't feel bad.
I know you're so right. I think I don't know if that's just like a female thing where we're always so guilty about not being like smiley and helpful and I don't know. I just feel like I want to be kind to everyone and if someone looks like they're in a very pathetic sad state, I'm not going to
I know.
just ignore them. But now I think I have the
It's like the hierarchy of needs, right? Like safety comes before feeling nice, and that's
you're
just
right.
the way it
I
is.
know.
Yeah.
You're so right. But just switching gears for a minute, you just did an episode of This Day in Crime. So that which is really cool. And again, you said you're not a journalist and you're not, an investigative journalist. Yes, you are. So just tell us about that. And what the
Yeah.
episode is about.
That was super fun. And there allegedly are more coming.
Oh yeah.
I'm very excited. It's been really fun. Obviously big fans of the Tenderfoot team
Yeah.
and everyone there, but like that team specifically, it was super fun to work with them. I it was my first time like hosting like a show that's like not mine. So it was
Yeah.
like really fun. I did love sort of getting to like feel like a newsie a little bit and like,
Yeah.
summarize a story and talk about it and interject sort of my personality. And that I think that was the most fun with This Day in Crime My show is very much like I like let my feelings and emotions come out, but I'm pretty dry.
Yeah.
And I think I'm
Yeah.
not really dry in real life. And so I got to like showcase my personality a little bit more as a host, which I think is really fun and let people get to know
Yeah.
me as like a person a little bit more. And I got to pick the stories. So I was like, these are stories that like I found really interesting. And I thought that was really cool. And it just felt a little bit more like personality based, which I had a really good time with. And yeah, I'm working on a couple more. So
Wait, so what is the episode? What is the one episode about? Which story is it? Or case, I
yeah,
should say.
so I did 6 or 7 stories on my last episode.
Okay.
And I covered, I mean, there were so many really interesting ones. One of the ones I did was there was a high school cheerleader. She was like leaving the mall with her friends, and a police officer was driving and he didn't have his lights or sirens on, but it seemed like he was chasing a traffic violator and he was going really fast and he hit their car and the driver died. I mean, she was like an 18-year-old high school
Oh,
student, like about to graduate from high school. And um when I did my episode, that they had just announced that he was going to be charged with murder. And so it was like really a
murder.
really crazy, yeah, it was vehicular um vehicular murder, I think is the title. So there were two charges. It was like manslaughter and then like this vehicular
Yeah.
one. And
Why do you think it was intended, or he had I don't get that.
I think because it was with a vehicle. It
Huh.
yeah, so, and it's
Crazy.
weird. So
Yeah.
I had a really interesting my friend was in a car driving in my hometown, and the light turned green for him, and he went, and there was an ambulance driving without their lights and sirens on, and they hit him, and he ended up surviving, but he got a really hefty settlement because if
Yeah.
you're doing that in, like, any sort of official vehicle, you have
Yeah.
to turn your lights and sirens on. And,
Right.
I think that was the big he didn't have his lights on, he didn't have his sirens on, and he was chasing a traffic violator. So, like, he was working, should have had those lights on. So that was a really
Wow.
interesting case. Um, and so that one I tried to mix up, like, harder ones and a little bit more lighter ones. So another
Yeah.
sort of harder story was, this woman was living with it must have been, like, sort of a group home situation,
Yeah.
because there was a landlord, and she had been dismembered by a tenant.
Oh,
And,
really? Yeah.
because she had been served an eviction notice, and the tenant did not like that, and murdered and dismembered her landlord. So that was really
Wow.
crazy, and was sentenced like
Wow.
65 years in prison. And so that was like a really crazy story. And then some of the lighter ones was like there was a new hot coffee lawsuit out of New Jersey. So instead of
Yeah, yeah,
McDonald's,
yeah.
it was Dunkin' Donuts.
Yep.
So there were like some like that, which I thought just were I love those. I think
Those
that
are so funny. It's like you
so
don't effing know, like, just don't I don't know.
I
That's
know.
crazy. Like,
It's really crazy.
yeah.
Yeah, so and, like, I love the 2011 documentary Hot Coffee about the original sort of McDonald's case, so if you haven't
Oh,
seen
I've
it,
never
it's
seen it. I'll
oh
have
my
to
god, it's
check it
so
out.
good. I
Oh,
love I love McDonald's stories. So Hot Coffee is an incredible documentary. Rest in peace, Morgan Spurlock. I loved Super Size Me. Morgan Spurlock is
oh,
from my
yeah.
home state.
Love that.
So another incredible one. And then if anyone hasn't seen it, it's on HBO or Max or whatever they're calling it now.
Yeah.
Um, it's called McMillions. It's about the McDonald's Monopoly
Yes.
game and the scheme that was happening. It is the characters in that story, the FBI agent in that story is like I mean, he needs to be like a game show host. He's so animated. Like, I am obsessed with him. And it's
I'll
such an
watch it
incredible
now.
story. You have to watch it. It's so good. It's like 6
Okay.
episodes. It's amazing. But yeah, McDonald's is pumping out a lot of schemes, and everyone should keep making documentaries about them because I love it.
Wait, this is so random, but I'm from New Hampshire, and I'm from a small town outside of the city, and there was this it's horrible, this McDonald's story, but they got sued because there was actual like, this is so gross, but there was actual shit on like the play place, like it was so disgusting. Yeah. This kid slid down a slide and he actually slid into another kid's shit, which was everywhere. Yeah. And the parents were just like, wait, he like yeah, it's so crazy. It was the most disgusting thing. And I think they got money from that because they just didn't clean it up. Yeah,
Oh my
I'll have
gosh.
to find it. But Sinead said, yeah, you need to add the documentaries to the show notes.
Oh,
So I
yes, I'll send
definitely
them to
will.
you. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it was
They're so good.
McMillions. And what was the one from 2011?
Hot coffee.
Hot coffee. Okay, I'll add
Yes.
those.
Oh,
And
and just one more if you want.
yeah,
It has nothing to do with McDonald's, but this is like one of my favorites as well. It's called Pepsi Where's My Jet? Have you seen it?
wait, I don't think so.
It's
Re-
so
Remind
good.
me of this? I don't know.
It's about
I don't
this
know.
kid. So back
Okay.
in the day, Pepsi did this contest. And it was
Okay.
like, if you have X amount of like Pepsi, like, I don't know, tickets, tokens, whatever, you
Does
will
sound
win a check.
yeah. Yeah.
And they made the number so high that it was like no one could, in order to buy this many Pepsi boxes, you could just afford a jet. So no one would buy this many. And
Okay.
this kid ended up just saying, like, went online and was like, mail me all your things. I'm trying to win a jet. So he had a bunch of people mailing him in these things, and he got enough to win the
Yeah.
jet. And Pepsi was not prepared to like give someone like
Yeah.
this type of like this jet that they were talking about. It was like a military grade like jet.
Yeah, my
And so it's a
husband told me about
documentary.
this. Yeah.
It's so good. It's all about his story and how he like, had to fight Pepsi to get this jet. And I mean, he does his interview like in an airlift thing. I mean, it's really good. It's really good.
Wait, that's yeah, no, my husband told me about this because there was like an article on it, like about the whole story when it came out. And there was like another guy involved too. I forget. Maybe it was a different documentary. But Tommy, are you being serious that there's a documentary on the McDonald's ice cream machines and why they're always down? Is that
Oh
for
my God,
real?
okay, this is a conspiracy, so I would love to watch that. I mean, McDonald's is like, I know that we're all worried about politics right now, but like we should be looking into McDonald's. Like there's something going on there that they're
Right?
not telling us. And they have more reach than presidents because they're international. I mean, there's something weird going on at McDonald's. Okay, you heard it here
Wait,
first.
that is so funny. And just one more comment from Tommy, just going back to one of the stories you discussed. He said cops are definitely responsible, even in a chase. They have to clear all intersections when chasing. There's a sheriff in Minnesota that goes live every Friday night. He talks about it a lot. Oh, that's
Crazy
interesting.
because that case was also from Minnesota, actually.
Oh, that's so random.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to look
Yeah.
that up. That's so
Yeah,
interesting.
you have to like, you can't just be chasing. And that's what I think is so interesting. I mean, I think about this all the time when I get speeding tickets. And I'm like, well, y'all are just driving fast around too.
Yeah.
Sometimes without like I'll see like a sheriff's car drive by really fast with like no lights on. And I'm like, they could be like late for an appointment and no one would think twice about it because they're just in a cop car. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, they might not be doing
absolutely.
anything important. And like we would
Yep.
never be like, oh my God, because we just assume whatever. So it is kind of
Yeah.
crazy.
No, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. God, I don't even think about that stuff. And I really should. Like, I really should think about, honestly, I don't drive that much because I'm in the city, but when I do
Yeah.
drive, everybody makes sure to tell me how horrible I am. So I should really move to the right when I see like the cop cars coming or the ambulances coming. I'm just kind of
Always.
like,
I
they'll move
get
around.
pretty like scared because I'm like, if like I'll move as well, but I'm like, they're going fast. And if for whatever reason, like they think I'm going just as fast and then they keep going,
Yeah.
like you never know. It's like it freaks me out. So I'm always like,
Yep. No, I totally hear you on that. I totally hear you. Well, Madison, this has been so much fun. You have to come back, especially
anytime.
when your internet is like
I
crystal
know.
clear and we can get you, yeah, your beautiful face on screen. But I'm gonna put your show in the notes, the documentaries that you mentioned, your social media handles. Is there anything else that I should include that you have coming up that you want to promote?
No, I mean, I think that's good. I am going to be back on This Day in Crime. So I have dates for that. I'm gonna be
Okay.
doing July 30th and August 1st.
Love
So
that.
next week, next Tuesday and Thursday.
Okay.
And I mean, listen, if you want me to keep doing that, you can just tell Tenderfoot that you love when I host This Day in Crime.
Yes, yes. Absolutely, absolutely. I honestly, you're amazing. You're so hardworking and you're so passionate. That everybody should follow you, listen to your show, and listen to everything that you do. So, thank you
You.
so much.
This was
Yeah,
so
I'm gonna.
fun.
Yeah, no, it was so fun. But like I said, it gets even more fun when we do like different times and stuff. Like today, we had a light crowd for lunch, but it was still fun. So we'll have to hop on for a nighttime live.
Oh,
And
yes,
yeah, which would
yes.
be so great when your show comes out. When you drop season 2. When is that
Oh,
going to
yes.
be?
So right now I'm wrapping up part 2. So the finale will drop in the next like week or two. And
Okay,
then I'll be like deep diving into investigative mode. I guess like sneak peek. I'm looking, it's not definite, but I'm looking at like a January, February
okay.
release. Yeah.
Well, then we have something to look forward to. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for watching and joining us. Madison, hang out for 1 second. I'm going to end the stream.
Okay.